Hello, everybody. We'll be starting the webinar in just a few moments, so sit tight while we wait for a few more people to jump in. If you'd like to just throw in the chat where you are watching the webinar from, that would be awesome. We can just get to know where in the world you guys are watching the state of data-infused decision-making and publishing from. So thank you all for joining. All right, we will go ahead and officially get started. So welcome everyone. My name is Erin Van Dyke. I'm the host for today's webinar on the state of data-infused publishing. For the next half hour, we're going to hear from publishing leaders who have been challenging the industry to embrace more frequent and meaningful ways to apply reader feedback and audience insights into their publishing programs. Just a few reminders before we get started. We are recording today's session, so you'll receive a playback. So if you're furiously writing down notes, don't worry, you'll be able to come and watch back the webinar and write down anything that you need to. Second, we have a survey that is going to pop up at the end of the session. So if you have just 1 minute, it's 4 questions to fill that out. We'd love to make future webinars as helpful as possible to those of you in the industry. So that's going to pop up as soon as the webinar ends. And also, if you have any questions throughout the session, you should be able to submit those. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So any questions that come up, just pop those in the Q&A section. We'll get to those if we have time. If we do run out of time for questions, then we will send out an email with answers to any of the ones that get submitted. So don't worry, we'll see them and we'll make sure that they get answered. So the goal for today is very simple: to improve the return on investment for each individual book for your catalog. So today we're going to hear from Jeff James. He's the CEO of Target Audience Insights. Jeff is also the former founding publisher of the HarperCollins Leadership business imprint, a vice president of marketing at HarperCollins, and former marketing executive at Microsoft. We'll also hear from Andrew Shaughnessy. Andrew is the director of editorial analysis at Target Audience Insights and has been a professional writer, editor, and analyst in international settings. We hear from Kevin Anderson, founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief at Kevin Anderson and Associates, a leading fast-growing ghostwriting and editorial services firm, and a #1 New York Times bestselling editor with over 50 national bestsellers. And lastly, Hannah Gómez, senior editor, cultural accuracy reading services at Kevin Anderson and Associates, who has worked on projects with major publishing houses and consumer packaged goods brands. So to have us get started, I'm going to turn it over to Target Audience Insights CEO, Jeff James. Jeff, what is the state of data-infused publishing?
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Erin. Well, we're going to dive into that. We're going to see where publishers are in the infusion of data to make better decisions. And, you know, as a former publisher, I didn't really grow up in the publishing industry. I actually came from the technology consumer industry. And I was a little taken aback by how intuitive the publishing industry has run. In other words, the lack of data decisions, data-driven decisions in the industry. So I think we can all agree that publishing has been a little slower than many industries in embracing this. And we want to talk through a little bit today about why that is, like who's actually doing it, why aren't we doing it more? Now, the good news is that publishing has been growing in its capacity for data, mostly in data mining, you know, what consumer trends are, so we can find, you know, interesting topics for books. But there's been very few publishers that have really focused on data as it relates to shaping better individual books. And that's really what we're talking about here, is how to improve the success rate of individual books, which make up your catalogs, obviously. So this quote from a Big 5 publishing professional that we've been interviewing and will actually appear in a blog soon, I think wraps it up pretty nicely where we're at. Now, sure enough, in our research, it's looking like I just could not really find good data to refer to. So we actually did a study. And so we did find that 70 to 85% of published titles fail to earn back their advance. That's a pretty low batting average for the most part. But, you know, the key is, like, why is that? What are the dials that publishers have to turn to the right setting in order for a book to succeed? And it turns out there are about 8 of them, essentially. There's a few smaller ones, but these are like kind of the core 8. might be the wrong packaging, could be the fact there's just not interest in the target market. There's a lot of things you have to get right for a book to work. What encouraged me as a publisher, as we started to embrace data, is that when you partner with a target reader, the target audience of your book, and you collaborate with them to shape the project, it turns out that about 6 out of these 8 dials can be optimized. They can be dramatically improved. And that could be figuring out what the interest level is. It could be tightening up and optimizing the title, the cover, and in fact, improving the manuscript itself through editing. So that's really what we're talking about today. Now, as I mentioned, I really couldn't find referenceable studies on who's doing what out there and how are publishers, how vastly are they embracing data. So we decided to do our own study. We partnered with our research partners at Sentiment to target publishing executives and professionals. And we did this in October, and I'm going to share with you just a little bit of the findings so you can get a sense of who's doing what out there. And after this webinar, we're going to send you the full study so you can see exactly where people are at. Now, not surprisingly, as I mentioned, we found that 76% of publishing leaders reported that only 1/3 or less of their titles met or exceeded their first 12-month revenue budget. In other words, the vast majority of books don't earn back, don't reach their budget. And about half of those reported that less than 20% of their titles made budget. I certainly experienced that as I was coming into publishing, and that's sort of what sparked my interest in evolving some approaches that can improve that batting average. Now, it doesn't really get much better when you look at advanced recoupment. Even though we're looking at now a 2-year period, again, 70% reported that 1/3 or less of their titles recouped their advance. And again, a big chunk of them didn't even get to 20% of their titles recouping. So that's a big, big challenge. The question we should all be asking is, well, why? Why aren't books doing better overall as an average? Well, we asked publishers, and again, they interestingly blamed their own marketing and publicity. Erin's a former book marketer, and she currently is, so she felt the heat of this, but they blame their own marketing and publicity teams and sales distribution efforts primarily. However, when you look under the covers, there are a lot of things that if you don't get them right earlier in the process, what book you acquired, how you position it, how you edit it. The other big ones were size of target audience, the author's platform size, of course, is a big factor, and just a lack of interest from that target audience. These are all things that could be identified and fixed if we infuse data from actual target readers into the process earlier. So what are they, what are they actually, how often are they actually testing things? So we found that about 60% rarely or never capture reader feedback. So despite that failure rate, we're not seeing a large number of people do it. And it is improving, however. We do see 43% sometimes or frequently engaging target readers. Unfortunately, the frequent number of that 43% is only 18%. So basically 1 out of 5 publishers of various types are consistently capturing feedback on, from readers on a specific title. I know as a former publisher that the challenges of in finding a business process and sort of creating a culture where we have time to build in for this. The tight editorial timeline was the biggest barrier. I thought it might be cost or lack of access to resources to do it, but it really was the feeling of pressure, like we have to hurry up and get this book out the door. But that causes us to sort of cheat ourselves and the authors from getting the feedback that we really need. We can address this problem and make sure, and we did in our old team, but there are ways of doing it so that you do build in feedback time in the process. So, despite a lot of reports that we heard from editors in particular that, the title decision-making, it can be very inefficient because going back and forth with authors on what's the title that, you should go out with, but only 10%, this is one of the easier things to actually test in the industry, to be able to put a few titles out get some reaction, but only 10% of them reported testing frequently on titles. And then looking at it from a cover design perspective, this is a little bit trickier because you do have to have enough cover comp designs to put up against each other to test. So it's not quite as easy as titling. But here, surprisingly, a little bit more publishers do test frequently, 15%, but still 58 never or rarely. So we're not seeing, even at the sort of easiest levels, a lot of activity there. Now, part of it is who has access to these kinds of resources in-house. Less than half have anyone in-house, whether it's an individual, audience insight analyst or someone like that, or a whole team. Some of the bigger Big Five obviously have whole teams that are trying to do this. But what we have found is that those teams get overwhelmed very quickly. Either their reader panel gets exhausted because you can't survey the same people over and over, or they just don't have the bandwidth to do it. So many of them are focused on broader market trends, and then they sort of feed those trends to publishers, or they do very simple title cover testing, and they're not getting into marketing metadata optimization, manuscript analysis, or any of the deeper things that we can find out for a book. So what we'd like to do, that's just a little, sort of preview of the findings. And again, you'll get this right after the webinar. I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Editorial Analysis, Andrew Shaughnessy, to get sort of a real world view of what's the dynamic, what are the benefits and the challenges of capturing feedback. So Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And for the sake of time, we'll jump right in here. We've got some questions for both Kevin and Hannah. Kevin, we'll start with you just to set the stage here, give us some context. Can you describe the services that KAA provides to authors and publishers? You're still muted there, Kevin. Yeah.
I told myself I wasn't going to do that, and then I did. Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Yeah, so we work with authors at whatever stage they're at in their writing process, and we help them create powerful books and navigate the entire industry. So we work with authors that are already with publishers, as well as authors that are just agented or that are just starting out on their publishing journey. And we're a team of former Big Five acquisitions editors and best-selling writers and project managers that all work together to help writers wherever they're at in their process. So whether they have a book that just needs editing, whether they need some book coaching, or they just want it reviewed and from the perspective of a acquisitions editor, or if they are concerned about cultural accuracy, we can do a review for that as well. And then we also do ghostwriting, and that's where we work with authors from the very beginning with planning, positioning, publishing strategy, writing the manuscript, and then helping them again with the whole publishing strategy and getting it to an agent or a publisher.
Yeah. So in that whole process of working with authors and helping them make their books better and develop their books, you've used our target reader manuscript analysis a number of times before. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and specifically how do publishers and acquisition editors respond to the feedback they get from that?
Yeah, we work with we've worked with the service a lot, and our editors and authors love the service because it really gives us an analytical tool that we can use, an actual data that we can make editorial decisions on. So authors, they can't trust their friends and relatives to be objective readers. So it's really helpful to have, target readers that can provide, clear and honest feedback. And we use it throughout the process it's for the positioning and trying to figure out whether the book is marketable in the first place, see if the concept is really resonating with readers. Once the manuscript's finished, doing the full review, and then, of course, with titles and book covers, it can be really helpful as well. And the publishers really like it for a couple reasons. I mean, it gives the author confidence that they've got this feedback and that they feel confident about the direction that we're going in. And a lot of times, publishers like it because they may see issues with the manuscript that they're trying to impress on the author to make some changes, and the author might be resistant. And oftentimes the beta readers come back and it really shows oftentimes exactly what the feedback that the editor was giving. So it gives them the tool to ensure that the manuscript is going in the right direction.
Yeah, I'd actually love to flesh out that last point you just said, where it helps the editors use the audience feedback to identify these things. In conversations I've had in the past with both authors and editors, they've mentioned blind spots and how sometimes they can be too close to the book they're writing, or there's so much industry insiders that there's these blind spots in manuscripts that they can't see, but others might be able to. Can you talk a little bit about how getting this audience feedback and target reader feedback can help you identify those blind spots and then know what to do with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we grow very close to the manuscript. The whole team does. The agent, the writer, the author, the publisher. So it's really, sometimes when you get the feedback, it points out trends and themes that are shared by multiple readers that we completely missed or didn't see, just because we're too close to it. And because it's such a comprehensive report, it really touches on a lot of different elements. So we found that to be really helpful, and it sometimes has changed the whole editorial direction of the project. So which is really great. It saved us from certain doom. So yeah, it's definitely nice to, even if it's a little thing, there's always blind spots that we see from the readers that we just didn't, you don't know what you don't know. So it's nice to get that data.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to jump over to Hannah now. So Hannah, you work in the sensitivity reader and cultural accuracy realm of publishing. Can you explain a bit about what that actually means, and then specifically how cultural accuracy feedback can help the publishing industry at large respond better to the needs of BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and other communities?
Yeah, so what started out as being called sensitivity reading has kind of been, has evolved into authenticity reading, cultural accuracy reading. So they all kind of mean, the same thing. So the job of the reader, of the cultural accuracy reader, is to do what a regular, editor would do: read the entire manuscript, not just portions of it. Just with a particular eye towards, typically some kind of marginalized experience, whether that's race or gender or sexual orientation, disability, and so on. So it's their job to both identify like minutia, like you'll go into the manuscript and be like, this word, is out of date, or this is actually not true, or, this is, whatever, this is a slur, or, whatever. And then also to do kind of like a general editorial letter with like, overall, your construction of this character is blah, blah, blah. So they're doing the job of an expert editor, just with additional expertise, the same way you might ask like a doctor to review your medical thriller to make sure you sound, generally, you haven't like said that the tibia is in the shoulder or something, right? Like just so that you have the basics right, but also just like, actually, that's not, how med school works or whatever. So very similar to both the like editorial and also the, the outside expert. And yeah, it came about with a few notable, instances of books being widely panned, mostly when they were in ARCs, not when they were already on shelves. Mm-hmm. So by, reviewers and bloggers, which, I mean, bloggers already occupy like an interesting space in the book world because they're sort of like semi-elite, I guess. They're not, getting the books for the trades, but they tend to be, getting books early. So the books in particular were kind of called out for racially insensitive content, but there have certainly been call outs for other areas of marginalization as well. And it really kind of put the industry in its place because, it's printing ARCs is expensive. And then if you have to go back and like do, a really comprehensive edit, that's going to set your timeline off. That's going to mean, wasted money in printing. And then that changes your catalog and all. So it kind of starts this avalanche of like scheduling and, economic issues to work out. So one of the reasons to do a cultural accuracy read is to save all of that time and money by doing it before you're kind of getting to the stage where it's out in the world and kind of making the rounds and gathering lots of bad publicity too. You only get one launch.
Yeah.
So,
No, great. That's super helpful. So it's interesting there. You talked about expert editor feedback, and we've also talked about sort of this general audience or target reader feedback. Can you talk a little bit about those two, the strengths and weaknesses of like, here is general audience feedback versus expert editor, and how they can sort of complement one another as well?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, ideally, right, like every book can reach everyone, like in our favorite world, every author would reach, like every one of the people on earth would love their books. But I think one of the things that has kind of made the publishing industry like have all of this stress is that, the various, kind of demographic groups, the intersectional identity of the author and their target audience may not match kind of the characters they're developing, or in the case of nonfiction, like the content they're describing. So a target reader might be very, might absolutely love, this novel, but not realize that, a bunch of stereotypes are being put in play, or, a bunch of inaccuracies. So it's nice to have both, because you have people like kind of, your target reader are people who were, already super, likely to buy your book. And then you also have an expert editor who may or may not be kind of someone who typically reads in your genre, but does know the content. And I think, because that's a problem we see all the way from, you can track this from when kids are about 3 years old, that they start to internalize, Jimmy is treated different than Jane in my school, and so looks different, and we use different words. And so the more you see all of these misrepresentations from childhood all the way to adulthood, the harder it is. It's one of those, like, it's easier to learn things right and takes like 3 times as long to unlearn and relearn a new thing. So
yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and I like that, they both bring strengths, but on their own, if you have just one or just the other, it's sort of insufficient. You need both. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Kevin. Jeff, I'm going to kick it back over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Kevin and Hannah. I mean, really what the picture we're trying to paint, as Andrew sort of summarizes, none of this stuff replaces each other, right? It's about connecting experts to the pulse of the target readers, and then feeding that back to an expert editor or writer who knows what to do with it in response. So the point of this, and I just want to sort of end, and we'll try to have some time for some Q&A here, is it's important to sort of figure out where along the publishing journey you're able to capture this feedback. And so we've developed a suite of services that we've put out there in the wild, and it's been really, really amazing to see the reaction from real readers feeding in at the right time of the different journey. So at the acquisition sort of pitching stage, you've got that interest score product, which is quantitative. How much interest and what sort of purchase intent for a book concept is there before you even get into all the other writing and development process? That's an amazing insight to have. And then you have more of a qualitative approach, where it's a deep dive manuscript analysis, finding out things that Hannah mentioned, as well as other angles that are often missed in the structure, in the voice, and all the different elements. It's really a lot of pressure to put one expert in charge of finding all that. But when it's found by a community of target readers, then the expert editor has a lot more to work with. And then we have the pretty straightforward quantitative title and cover optimization products. And even for publishers that have an in-house team doing that, to be a good spillover resource, so that you can make sure that more of your books get that kind of treatment very, very efficiently. And finally, we wanted to let you know of a new service that we've come out with called the Target Reader Marketing Optimization. People are very excited about this because it's tough. Even though we focus so much on metadata and keywords, finding out what effective keywords there really are in the actual context of real readers, we can crowdsource that now through this product, and we can test your book hook and your book description for how effective that's going to be. So we're pretty excited about that process. Now, I just want to finish with a quick conversation about cost versus return on investment. A lot of this has to do with how much feedback do we need to be able to trust it. And so we have fine-tuned the level of responses at the qualitative or quantitative level to make sure that we achieve the goal of, statistical confidence. And we make sure that we have reader qualification criteria that are very clear. In other words, you're not just putting out a broad survey on a very specific book. We do not charge extra for those additional layers of targeting, whereas a lot of kind of generic audience insight platforms do. Like, it can get very expensive to find the right person, but we don't do that. And then the ROI is kind of surprising. Like, how many extra units of a book are you going to have to sell to pay for this extra little step? And it's surprisingly not a lot. So we've actually created an ROI grid that we're very happy to share with you to just show some scenarios, like how many books would you need to sell extra to cover a manuscript review, or some basic title testing, things like that. So there's a lot of time saved internally also on not having to go back and forth a million times with an author. And you can actually invite the voice of the reader in the process. That saves quite a bit of time. So happy to share that with you for anyone who is interested. And I think that's it. Erin, do we have any questions?
So we do have one question. How long do each of the products take to complete? Yeah,
that's very important for that timeline. We are very happy, and as a publisher, I was super sensitive to this, so we've worked very hard to make this very quick. The quantitative surveys get back in 3 days. We can sometimes get them back a little bit sooner. It's about 3 days, maximum 4, but it's a very quick turnaround on the surveys. On the manuscript review, we literally have readers go through the entire manuscript. That takes a little bit of time. But we like to ask for 3-week turnaround on that. We do have an ability to do rush jobs in about 2 weeks, but we'd like to keep it around 3 to make sure that we've captured, really meaningful stuff there.
Great. And then a question from Summer. I work in juvenile category. Who do you consider the target audience for picture books, the children or the adult buyer? And are you able to provide target audience feedback for juvenile categories?
Yeah, great question. As you can imagine, with the safety measures of not, having a panel of a bunch of kids, we don't really have the ability to go after, the children in that sense. So certainly it's more of a parent structure there. We are a little bit limited on children focused, whether that's, children's. YA is, it depends on what sort of age range, but our panel currently are adults, so 18 and above are primarily where we're focused for now.
Great. Another question, do you specialize more in fiction or nonfiction?
Well, we're very happy that we have fantastic, we call them first look readers. That's our reader community, and we have thousands of them, and they're very diverse in their interests. We have equal, fiction versus nonfiction. We can find, let me just say it this way, we have not been tripped up yet on finding the target audience that the publisher or the author was looking for. And we certainly have strengths in both fiction and nonfiction.
So let's see, how many readers, consumers do you typically survey for purchase intent?
All of our quantitative studies are 300 minimum responses. That's because that's usually at least the level that you'll get a 95% confidence level in the response relative to the wider, audience. Sometimes we actually get a little bit more, but we guarantee 300 qualified responses for the quantitative surveys.
And then maybe one last question is, how do you become a first look reader?
Well, we'd love to have you. We just constantly invite people into that community. Go to firstlookreaders.com and everything you need is right there. It's a very smooth process, and you can see how deep we do ask reader preferences and different backgrounds so that we know who they are, and that's why we send the manuscripts that we do to them.
Excellent. All right, and if any other questions come in, just to be respectful of all of your time, then we'll be sure to answer those over email. But thank you all for joining. Thank you to the speakers. Before we conclude, as you'll see on the screen here, you'll receive a couple of follow-ups via email. So you'll receive a link to the State of Data-Infused Publishing full study, special offer to try the Target Audience Insights research services, and then contact information for Kevin Anderson and Associates. And then also some links to the targetaudience.insights.com, where you'll find more product information, quote calculator, and just a way to contact for any in-depth ROI analysis. And just a reminder, as soon as you hop off, you will get a survey. If you just have 1 minute, it's 4 questions. We want to make sure that the future webinars can best serve anyone in the publishing industry. So thank you in advance for sending in the answers to the survey. And other than that, everyone have a great rest of your day, and be sure to look out for a follow-up email from Target Audience Insights.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take
y'all.
care, everybody.